Hello and welcome to Mac Truck's Book Stop, where I'm continuing my international reading series with The Mountains Sing by Nguyen, Phan. Yeah, the Vietnamese pronunciation in this video is not going to be great. It's a tonal language. I don't speak Vietnamese, but I'm going to do my best. And before I begin, I just want to say please like and subscribe if you do enjoy the video and want to see more, or at least just get some titles to look at. You know, even if you just want to watch like 2 minutes of me talking and then be like, oh, I'll check this book on my own, that's great too. You know, if anyone would like to comment as well, I would love to hear other people's thoughts on these books. I look up booktubers all the time but never comment because I'm, I guess, shy. So you know, if you have any comments, then I would love to hear them and not just have this one-way discussion, but actually engage in some discussion with other people about these books. So, that being said, now I'm going to start talking about The Mountains Sing, and start with a non-spoiler section, and then let you know when I'm going to talk about spoilery things. So, The Mountains Sing follows a family, the Tran family, in North Vietnam. And at the beginning of the book, we start during the Vietnam War. The two kind of principal characters are Wong, who starts the novel as, I think, like a 10-year-old girl, but then grows up throughout the novel to, you know, university age. So it follows like 8 to 10 years through the Vietnam War and its aftermath. And it's interspersed with flashbacks of her grandmother, Du Lan, telling her about episodes of Vietnamese past from her life. So, and it's all very personal, you know. It's Grandma Du Lan telling about her life and the things that happened in the past, which go all the way back to the 1920s and 30s, with French colonialization, then the Japanese invasion and what they call the Great Hunger, and then the land reform program of the communist government when they took over, and then finally the kind of present day at the beginning of the novel is the Vietnam War. So Grandma Du Lan and Wong, very early in the novel, find their home has been bombed, and it's they no longer have a home. So Grandma Du Lan turns to the black market to survive and support the little family, which at this point are pretty much all women because all the men have been sent to war. You know, as they're basically just picking up the pieces and waiting to see who can return. So, you know, at the beginning of the novel, you don't know who in this family is left alive. They don't know. And throughout the novel, they're going to find pieces. You know, they're going to find what happened to some of them. Some will return. Some will never return. It's part of the war and the trauma that follows every part of this book. I mean, there is death in every episode, from the parts of during the Vietnam War to the flashbacks with Grandma. Vietnam is a traumatic history, you know, from the whole 20th, pretty much the whole 20th century up to present day. I don't know exactly when things got better, but yeah, there's a long traumatic history there. And despite that, I want to say this book is very uplifting, which is strange. Like, emotionally, it's difficult, but it's uplifting, and it's the struggles and the resilience of this family, despite, you know, making the best of what they have, making the best of the situation, being able to let go of certain traumas, or working through them. And there's just so much uplifting in this novel, despite all of the trauma, that it's really beautiful. It's really beautiful. The the other thing is how the culture and the landscape is interspersed in all this. You know, I really felt like I was there in Vietnam in these time periods, and looking at the landscape, the I could feel the subtropical climate of the karsts and the mountains, and you know, this times in the city, the bustle of the city. I could feel, um, I could live the culture by being shown and not told. Um, you know, there's never this exposition of like, oh, this is our culture and this is why we do certain things. It's just that's how the characters behave, and you get it. You kind of sometimes there's words in Vietnamese that, like, I had to Google quite a bit to even understand what they were at first, but then kind of context gives you ideas or clues as to what they are. So it's a great way of all like giving you the experience of the culture, but also making you work a little bit so that you feel a little bit strange, like you would if you visited a country that you aren't familiar with the culture. So um, anyway, what I'm trying to say is it was a great just window, you know, into another place, which is exactly what I'm looking for in this series of trying to read books from other countries. Nguyen Phan dedicated a good 7 years of her life to this novel and did an incredible job representing all of Vietnam, or you know, all the different perspectives of Vietnam in one family, and all of the complicated richness. For example, uh, it's not North Vietnamese communists versus South Vietnamese non-communists in the Vietnam War. There's a lot of complexity. There's a lot of patriotism in her family, despite also criticism and subversion of the communist government. So patriotism of, you know, fighting against the American invaders, just like they fought against the French and the Japanese in the past, and the Chinese even before that. Is, you know, this patriotism to defend their country, but also realizing that the government is making grave errors, which their family has felt through the land reform program, which is a very central and important episode in the book. And I have some mixed feelings about it, but it's a very important episode, which I'll talk about in the spoiler section. But yeah, just know it is a ride through Vietnamese history, and if any of this sounds interesting to you, I really recommend you go read it. And I don't want to spoil much at all. So this is the end of the non-spoiler section. If it sounds interesting to you, just go read it. All right. So one of the main themes of this novel is forgiveness. And it's really interesting to me, and I think the point that I personally, like, internally have the most conflict with this book about, or you know, and from the beginning I kind of knew it was headed this way, was about the land reform program. Now, in the book, it's such a central episode because it's when Grandma Du Lan loses her, you know, her family basically has their land stripped from them by this mob of peasants who are empowered by the government basically to strip all landowners of their land and divide it amongst the landless. And she describes these mobs as these mobs as like purposely being outfitted and led by the most resentful, bitter people that could be found. Like, perhaps this is true, but I also felt in the sense that it was overlooking something that the book in the beginning was showing, or trying to show, that, you know, this family has been pretty well off even since the early days and during French colonization and all that. It's been one of the richest families in the province. And yes, they have some landless and poor people that they've taken in to work for them. They've treated them well, and they're loyal to them even during this land reform. But I feel that it misses a little bit of why, or what I wanted to understand is what really drove these mobs of peasants to, you know, treat landowners so inhumanely. And I don't, maybe the author probably doesn't have an answer for it either. Um, but it's always the question with, and you can't avoid the discussion of communism, where this ideology fueled such hatred during these land reforms and such excesses. Even Ho Chi Minh, the communist leader of Vietnam, came out and apologized for it years later, but did nothing to correct the families that had been torn from their land and whatever. But the fact is, even people with very little land had their land taken from them. So it just went to such an extreme, and so many revolutions go that way. They go to an extreme, not just communist revolutions, but any revolution you can think of tends to go to an extreme and becomes like another kind of tyranny when it comes to governance. And in fact, the governance that comes after can be more tyrannical than the one before it. And this just repeats over and over in history. But while the book took such a personal perspective of the Tran family, and really made you feel their suffering, their pain, their resilience, their struggles, a lot of these peasants were just written off as resentful mobs. But it just kind of was strange to me to see such complexity from the perspective of this one family that has been kind of one of the richest in the province, but then a lot of others kind of written off as just mobs, but there is a really cool episode at the end of the book where there's like the family returns to their hometown, and they show forgiveness to the people that took their land from them. So I guess that in some level is an acknowledgement of that complexity, that to forgive them is to acknowledge that there's all this pain and all this trauma in Vietnam even before the land reform. So just trying to understand each other, that is what the book comes to. And it makes sense. It makes sense that the family, this richer family that had their land taken from them, was reduced to poverty, just like millions of Vietnamese people. I mean, this family goes from one of the richest of their province to no home, nothing, and then grandma, through her resilience and craftiness and people skills, basically builds their fortune back up. And with the help of her family, of course. The family working together is everything. So it makes sense that this family would see that mob of peasants that took their land from them and divided it amongst themselves as, with this sort of like hatred, or not hatred, but just anger, and like seeing them as bitter and resentful, and that's it. It makes sense. But by the end of the book, again, that the divisions that, and this is something that the author has pointed out, and she's right, I'm sure, because I don't know, but I'll definitely take her word for it, that these traumas are still alive in Vietnam today, not just the Vietnam War, the land reform. A lot of people had their land taken from them, even small landowners, and then the French colonization. All these traumas are still alive today. And the Vietnam War especially is still, and the North versus South, that's a whole other thing that I don't even know where to begin talking about. There's people in the Tran family that fight on both sides, and that was a common thing in Vietnam, that there were soldiers on both sides in the same family. A lot of families had people that fought it, that had people from their family that fought both for the South and the North, or some for the South and for the North. So that and that sort of conflict runs in the family, where the people that fought for the South were seen as lesser citizens and sent to re-education camps after the war and things like that. And then Agent Orange is another, the fact that the Americans used all this Agent Orange during Vietnam, causing birth defects, cancer, things like that. And it's just there's all of these traumas, both ecological, physical, emotional, and it's all of this leads the author to the conclusion of forgiveness, that the Vietnamese amongst themselves need to start understanding each other and understanding their perspectives. And that's so interesting. So whatever I just said about the land reform, I might be coming from a completely wrong place, because the Vietnam still has this government of where all of the land technically belongs to all the people. They still have the Communist Party in charge, but they've shifted to more of a market socialism from what I understand. I actually watched a really great video about how the land reform actually is working today. Like the land reform is still a thing today. And I'm going to find that video and link it in the description, because it was really interesting and gave me like another perspective of how the land reform is working today in Vietnam. It's just another perspective that complemented this book well, realizing that all of this past trauma with the land reform actually today it looks a bit different in a more market socialist context. So it's interesting at the very least. I don't know if I necessarily agree or disagree with it. I don't want to be too political. I just find it interesting, and I'm trying to learn. So the Mountains Sing as a novel is also, I would say, not particularly political. These are personal reactions that make sense from the characters, and one of my favorite characters actually is one of the uncles. I hope I can remember his name, because I have to talk about him. I think it's Dot. Anyway, he came back from the Vietnam War as basically a war hero, but he's lost one or both of his legs, and he's in a wheelchair and from stepping on a landmine, I believe it was, and yeah, it's Dot, and he comes back and he's drinking a lot. He's an alcoholic. His girlfriend at home, or significant other, was at home this whole time, and he's afraid that she's not going to be happy with him or going to reject him. So he tells he kind of pushes her away at first, but then she decides she still wants to be with him, and it's a really nice story. But and he struggles with alcoholism too, because he's afraid he won't be able to get a job, and that's another reason he's pushing this his significant other away, because he's like, with me, I'm not going to be able to get a job, not support for you. So yeah, all these things, but then they work together, and he's able to get a job, I believe, making sandals, and that's just a beautiful story arc for his character. And I love how he's like a war hero, fought in the war. He's still patriotic to some level, but he's also like, he's not like one of the brothers Sang, who's all up in the Communist Party and kind of like trying to get up in the ranks and distancing him. He's not distancing himself from his family like this other brother. That's another thing that brother Sang would be interesting to talk about. But yeah, the difference between those two is interesting. Both fought in the war, but one kind of distances himself from the family to go up in the ranks of the Communist Party, and can't associate with grandma because grandma's selling on the black market. But Dot, the one I like, said, you know, I'm not going to put government before family, and kind of stays with the family, and isn't afraid of that. I mean, especially when you've lost something as just fundamental as your legs, it's like, who else do you have to rely on, but your family in that kind of situation. And in some ways, Sang is kind of very lucky, very spoiled, but just like in the book when they say inside bad luck hides good luck, that's a recurring phrase that really demonstrates the resilience of the Tran family. In good luck sometimes hides bad luck, in the sense that you don't, if your luck is too good, you don't learn to appreciate the people who are really there for you. So it's kind of a reversal of that phrase, I guess, that you hear throughout the book. The other, but yeah, and then there's I guess the most emotionally impactful things in the book. There's a big twist at the end where Wang's, the main character's significant other, who she wants to marry, she finds out that his grandfather was a French landowner that whipped her grandmother and gave her a big scar across the neck when she was younger. And this is like the hardest person for the family to forgive. But in the end, they do. And Wang, you know, eventually goes on to marry this man, regardless of the fact that his grandfather is this man. And it's a little fairy tale-ish. I mean, like, it feels a little bit metaphorical in the sense that, like, wow, that would be just an insane coincidence that, you know, that would happen. So not from like a realistic perspective, but if you suspend your disbelief a bit, it's like, you know, it is a fictional story. It's trying to say something. It's a metaphor. I don't need it to be totally realistic. And that was a much more powerful ending than not having it, I think. But to me, what was more powerful than that was the fact that Wang never finds her father and never really learns what happened to him. Only that, you know, he kind of just disappeared in the bombing, and she finally accepts his death by the end of the novel. And the little wooden bird that he gave her, the title comes from that wooden carving. It is just this beautiful symbolism that carries throughout the book, and that her father is always present but never there. And that really ties into the spirituality too that's presented in the book, that the dead are still with us, and that's part of the Vietnam. Again, all of the culture in this book is shown and not told, which is just so expertly done. I feel like there's a lot more things I could and want to say about this novel, but I mean, it's just best experienced, and I will almost certainly read it again. There's a sort of like, I also too want to say, like, there's an innocence to the writing in the sense that you can tell this is like her first novel, you know? Like, that's not to say the writing is bad. It just has this sort of like treading into unknown water feel, instead of like it being sort of this master work of every word being specifically perfect it's not like an Odyssey type epic, but it is big and it's impactful, and again, the innocence to it is more of a charm, and it fits the narrator being kind of a person growing up. And by the end of the novel, it's almost like the writing matures with the novel, which is really, or as you advance in the novel. And that might have been intentional, and if so, also expertly done. But yeah, the writing is beautiful and easy to read. and all the other things I mentioned. I just want to keep talking about this book. Honestly, it's just like I don't want to stop, but I probably should. I'm at about the 25-minute mark, which is when I stopped my last videos. So yeah, maybe I'll talk more about it when I reread it, and I would love to have a conversation with somebody about this book, really. So comment if you have anything to say about what I talked about. So, The Mountains Sing, pick it up. Well, if you're still watching, hopefully you already read it because of the spoilers. I think I did that last video too. Yeah. Well, thank you for watching. See you next time.